Welcome to Who Are You, a CSI podcast. I am Raven, and I have seen CSI through and through around 3 to 4 times.
And I'm Nick, and this is my first time experiencing these episodes.
And today we are reviewing Season 3, Episode 13, Random Acts of Violence. Original air date was January 30th, 2003. Director is Danny Cannon. Writers are Anthony E. Zeiker, Danny Cannon, and Naren Shankar. And we start the episode, like we do many of an episode, with shots of the Vegas Strip before we kind of go to the just the burbs, like not really the burbs, like the neighborhood, and then to like to teens kissing. But before we go any further than that, what is our Vegas score for today's episode?
We have a rock solid Vegas score, 47.
Wow, there were a lot of cuts. There were a lot of Vegas cutscenes.
I don't remember if I believe I said this on the podcast last time, of how they've been front loading.
Yes, front loading the
cutscenes. They
yep.
backloaded. I was like, "Are you making a liar out of me, Anthony Zeiker?"
He's like, 20 years from now, somebody's going to be reviewing this on a podcast, and I need to call them out.
Yeah, and so there's a real come behind. Our score doubles basically in the last 10 minutes of the episode.
Okay, wow.
It was. Right. And in fact, on the rewatch, it was so confusing. I was like, I think I got them all. I hope I didn't. Because when you're that close to a perfect score, I would hate
to miscount.
Yeah. Like one, I mean, it would have to be a kind of long one, but one scene. Although the opening scene, I had to have some personal interflection about what the score should be.
Okay.
Because there is two scenes. You can't really see the strip in one of them, but it's pretty broad and you can see, I think, the edge of part of the strip.
Okay.
But the first shot is transitional in its own right. It goes from daytime to nighttime and a super sped up thing. And I was like, is that two shots? Is that one shot? It wasn't a cut.
True. It's not a cut.
It was kind of a blend, but so I kind of split the difference there and just said that other scene isn't quite a Vegas-y scene, but I'm just giving them the full amount of time and just two scenes and
fair
split the difference. I mean, if I counted as three scenes, it wouldn't have gotten us to 55. If we were sitting at 52 right now, we would actually be sitting at 55 because I would have just bend the rules for a perfect Vegas score. But
that's fair.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting Vegas episode for that, just because I felt like I was like, oh, you're always at the front, and then there's nothing at the end.
Yeah.
And then I started writing. Yeah. I was like, holy, there was two shots of the strip that were booked in on either sides of a scene.
Okay.
And I was like, that's a lot of Vegas real fast.
Yeah. You're like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right. So pretty solid Vegas score for today's episode. So yeah, we're in the burbs. So I don't know if they're teens. They're supposed to be early 20s. I don't know. I'm so bad with age.
I'm pretending they're their 20s based on comments made about how one of them looked by an adult later on in the episode.
This is a very fair point. So we're going to say early 20s. And then we go inside a house. There's a boy playing a video game. His dad, who is my first spot, the guest, or heard the guest star.
Oh, that's a really good call out, because this actor, Keith David, is in a lot of things.
He's in a lot of
things. He's one of the most prolific voice actors, iconic voices, such that I was trying to remember a very specific thing that I knew him from. And in doing so, I stumbled upon a Reddit thread where people were arguing about whether he or the very recently passed James Earl Jones were a more famous voice. And to be even put in that conversation... Right? Is an accolade in upon itself.
I would agree.
But his voice acting creds are miles long. If you do not know this actor, you have heard him 30 times.
He is in between acting, in front of the camera acting and voice acting. He has 380 credits.
Yeah.
Do
you have a favorite or two? Or what do you...
Okay, so voice-wise, Dr. Facilier from Princess of the Frog, he's the villain.
Yep.
And I watched
that's a major character. I've never seen that movie.
Okay, I watched that movie at least once a year. Okay. So as soon as I heard his voice, I was like, wait a second, I know that voice.
Oh yeah, perfect.
And then when I saw him, I was like, I also know him. What I know him from is Armageddon and Pitch Black.
Yes. Okay. So those are two big blockbuster movies.
Those are the two movies.
Decently big roles in both of those
Yes.
movies, not starring, but
Yeah.
definitely a decent amount of screen time.
Yeah. So those are the two. So voice-wise, Princess and the Frog. Movies-wise, Armageddon and Pitch Black.
So I have to call out his voice as the main gargoyle in the animated
Gargoyles.
show Gargoyles.
So good.
Which is like
such
one
a
of
good.
like
So good. It's on Disney Plus. So listeners,
yeah.
if you did not watch it as a childhood enjoyment, you can enjoy this still as an adult and watch it on Disney Plus. Disney Plus, feel free to sponsor us.
Most recently, and this is the thing I was looking for a clip because I'm pretty sure from a video standpoint, I recognize him because he's in quite a few episodes of Community, where I think he is also occasionally the narrator.
Okay.
I want to make sure I mention Community because it's going to come up again later.
Yes, it will.
Yeah.
So this is Keith David. He, in this episode, is playing Matt Phelps. At this point, we know that he's a father of 2 children.
He's dad.
He's dad.
Quotation marks in my notes.
Yeah, and so he's like trying to wrangle his kids to bed. His daughter, goes into her room. The son is like just about like starting to like get up to go head to bed, and then there's a drive-by shooting. There's just like shots and bullets start like ripping through their house. So the father basically tackles his son to the ground and like covers him. And once the shooting stops, he gets up, he checks out, makes sure that his son is okay, and then he instantly is like, "Oh no, Amy," and goes and runs to her room.
One note: the son is playing a very 2000s early like MOBA, not MOBA, but MMORPG-esque style online video game,
which sort of comes up again later. Not that video game, but like the video game style comes up again later.
Yeah, and I think they're intentionally very similar in look and appeal. Reminds me heavily of a game I used to play called EverQuest.
Oh yeah.
This is for the tail end because it was very close to the time that the much more famous World of Warcraft would launch.
Yeah,
which it looks, World of Warcraft looks significantly better. Probably, I don't know. That game has probably evolved so much I couldn't be honest, but I do remember that sort of age of like polygon-esque. They look realistic, but also look super fake at the same time.
Yep.
And there's almost like a nostalgia just seeing that on screen. So
yeah.
And it does, as you alluded to, creeps up again later.
It does creep up again
makes
later.
Me wonder, not super importantly, though. So it makes me wonder why the sudden influx of references to video games in this episode.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I don't think we're going to answer that question, but we'll see. Yeah. We then have Grissom and Warwick on scene. We learn that Warwick grew up, like this is like near where he grew up. This is kind of like the neighborhood.
Did you catch there's a guy in the crowd who like shouts at him?
Yes.
He's like, "You're gonna get him." I missed it the first time. I caught it on the second time.
Okay, I didn't put it in my notes, but
I had the context. The
second time.
Yeah.
So Jim Brass is giving them a rundown. There was the male of the couple outside was like grazed by the shooting. So at this point, they think that he was the target. So they think that like they're going after him. But then we learned that the actual victim is Amy Phelps, which Warwick is like Phelps, and we see him entering the house, and then he immediately starts comforting the dad. And so we learn that they obviously know each other. They have I would say, a fairly close relationship.
He runs the rec center in the town.
Yes, in the town. And
sort of led to believe Warwick would go to this rec center as a child.
Yeah, Warwick tells him that he's living proof that he makes a difference, right? Like, you helped me, like, I'm living proof that like what you do makes a difference in this community, in this neighborhood.
That's a pretty key line. He speaks it very softly.
Yeah.
And I was like, what did he just say? And I like went back and re-listened to it, and I went, oh, they really needed to spend an extra second on that.
This is why. This is why I watch things with subtitles on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I watch with I watch everything with subtitles, not just this. I watch everything with subtitles. So Grissom goes into Amy's room. He notices like bullet holes in the wall. Warwick comes in. I will note that this is a very powerful scene without words needing to be spoken. Warwick comes in. He sits down on the bed, which I did have to be like, contaminating evidence? Like, have you guys like processed the bed yet? Like, that makes me a little nervous. But take that out of it. He sits down on the bed and he like almost goes to like touch Amy's hair, like in a very like caring older brother-y sort of way. And then he stops himself. And Grissom takes note and is like, hey, are you going to be able to handle this? Right? Like, you're obviously emotionally vested in this. Are you going to be able to handle this? And Warwick says, I want this case. Cut to credits. No, very fairly. No fun line to credits. Like, we just, we go to credits.
No weird pun.
No weird pun, which thank you, CSI, for being aware enough to realize that this was not a scene that you should end in a weird pun. So
I will say it's a great, maybe not a great, it's an interesting moment where Grissom, and I think it's important because it's called out later, is often very sort of detached emotionally from these things.
Yes, that's why I wanted to point out that he like noticed.
Gives it.
Yep.
To Warwick,
he does.
right?
He does still give it to Warwick, but he notices, hey, like you're emotionally tied to this one. Like, can you handle it? Like, is this going to be okay? And he trusts. He trusts Warwick.
You would only do that because you were doing it for Warwick. Because for the like in an objective world, you
would never do it.
Say it's not worth the risk.
Right.
Sorry, man.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Right? You can't have this case
because you're doing it for him.
Yeah.
And so
we'll see how that goes for. We'll see how that goes for Chris.
Don't know if that makes him a good or bad supervisor, but we give him crap sometimes, so we have to give him crap.
It makes him sympathetic, which is nice.
Yes. He's coming around.
He's coming around a bit. So we go to credits. We return to Warwick and Grissom. They're still in the house. And this is where we learn that Mr. Phelps was robbed a few weeks ago. Like, some of his like medals and trophies and things were taken. And as they're looking at like the damage and like the cartridges left behind, they realize that they're looking for an automatic when it comes to a gun. We hard pivot to storyline B. We're with Nick and Vega at a .com office. And
it sounds like a cereal, and then there's like this weird
it's like Hyperfix or something. Hyperflex,
Hypertrix, I think.
Hypertrix. Okay.
Cereal,
Okay.
So, but there's this weird line where Vega's like, my NASDAQ stock is worth less than my kid's comic book, and Nick
collection,
goes, .com, more like
dot bust.
And I'm thinking like that line does not hold up. Every company worth a dime these days is heavily involved online.
This is very true.
I was like, I get there was a .com boom and a bust, and
there was.
That's what happens with speculative investment. But I was like, the internet is here to stay, folks. Sorry. Mm-hmm. We're living proof of it.
Yes, we are, as we record this remotely.
We're not
just as a fun fact, listeners, we're not in the same room when we record because we live about an hour away from each other, and it would be very hard to coordinate that in the middle of the week.
True, absolutely.
So we record remotely. So we learn that 4 people entered the office. No one has left the office. And they're walking by 3 workers in cubicles. And the final cubicle is my second, and I believe Nick's also, spot. The gift star.
Yeah.
This is Jim Rash. He plays Todd Benton in this episode. And as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh, I know him. But I couldn't immediately place him. I was like, but I definitely know. Like, I was like, there's no way I don't know him. And so
I knew exactly who it was.
So then I went onto his IMDb, and then it was like, it's Dean Pelton from Community. And I was like, oh, right. Yes, that is who that is.
I watched Community for the first time on like the tail end of 2020.
Oh, okay.
It was one of the many things there are a lot of like real big shows that people liked and watched that I had never seen that I watched by recuperated commute time during 2020.
I think a lot of people followed the same suit.
And so like when I watch 6 or 7 seasons of Community or whatever in like a 1 month span, like that was only a couple of years ago. So I was like, in my head, I was like, I know exactly what this guy is.
Yeah.
Because also all those things were together.
He was also Fenton on That 70s Show, and I do recognize him from That 70s Show.
And he's in That 90s Show, which I didn't even know was a thing.
It is. So I think they just canceled it, but it's been fun. Like, it's fun because it has fun throwbacks to that 70s show, and then it's fun because we're 90s kids, and they do have a ton of reference to the 90s, so it is fun in that sense.
Yeah. I saw that picture and I was like, what weird 90s sitcom was he on? I was like, oh, it's designed to look like a 90s.
It is designed to look like a 90s
like
sitcom.
a late 90s, early 2000s, sort of like the way that people are dressed. And I was like, well, I guess they nailed it. Because that's what I thought it was.
Yep, so we see these three coworkers. They end up, not all the workers, but Nick and Vega end up going into a server room. David is there. David has his first of a few appearances, so good for you, David, not just having your like 1 3-second clip. He's a little bit more involved this time. And we learn that the victim is Garrett Kwan. He is the company's CTO. David estimates that he's been dead for about 5 to 7 hours, and there is evidence of blunt force trauma, but there's like not really any blood. So they're like a little confused at this junction.
I had to figure out really what they try to explain why, because they show you like the head seeping a little bit.
Yes.
And they try to explain it that he was, but they do a really bad job of it because they don't do a reenactment or anything, is that he was face down.
Yes.
And so like there was nothing was really coming out, and then paramedics rolled him over.
So now to check for vitals. Yeah.
Even though he's been dead for 5 to 7 hours. I was like, does your blood not coagulate when you're dead? I don't know, but I assumed the answer was going to be yes.
I don't know how long it takes. And I don't know if like the cold temperature plays a role.
Or rolling him over like broke a scab, you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's probably quite a few different things at play here. So we're then back to storyline A. We're with Jim Brass. He's outside with Warwick. We learn that the guy outside, Jason Gilbert, was not popular. Again, they're thinking that he was the target of the shooting at this stage. And this is when Warwick makes a comment that his girlfriend is very hot. And so...
And that he's a white guy.
And he's a white guy. And these people are like trying to mac on her. And so that's why we're going to say that she's in her early 20s. And it's an appropriate comment to make.
A less inappropriate comment.
A less inappropriate comment. That is fair. It's still not an appropriate comment to make, but it's a less inappropriate comment.
Especially when you're investigating a crime scene at your job. Talking to a coworker.
Yeah. So thankfully we don't dwell on that one too long. They realized that the mailbox was knocked over on the corner and that the dent on the mailbox is pretty high. So it was most likely a truck or an SUV that hit the mailbox. And there's also silver paint transfer. So they're like, we're probably looking for something that has like silver paint on it.
We've also transitioned to digital cameras, which is great.
Yeah.
And they didn't make a big deal of him like taking it in out of his pocket, putting it away as if they wanted to like show off how sly it was. There was a quick second where I thought that we were going to get a comment like, oh yeah, this is my brand new Olympia.
Yeah, like
1.3 megapixel.
Yeah, we haven't had a product placement in a while, like a legit product placement in a good long time.
Yeah.
So
but he only took one photo before he moved the mailbox.
Yeah. Well, no. I guess one is all he needed. Yeah. I don't know. An officer walks over and lets them all know that a guy is being detained at a bar because he flashed an automatic weapon. So they're like, hey, this is probably a lead you want to follow in regards to this case because like this guy is downtown flashing an automatic weapon. So Jim Brass and Warwick are with the bar owner and he's explaining how this guy, when he comes in, he's always trouble. And, tonight he was, kind of starting some issues with him, and then he shows him his piece. And we learn that the guy in question is Gene Jacobs. Warwick went to school with him. So Warwick is getting like really intertwined with this case beyond just Mr. Phelps and the rec center. So Warwick goes, swabs his hands for gunshot residue, and then like makes a point to let Gene know that he could get the results right then and there, but he's not going to. He's gonna go run it back to the lab. So he needs to sweat it out for a while.
Which I think implies guilt, right? You obviously wouldn't be worried if you weren't guilty.
Yes. So we're then back to our employee spot, the guest star. He's rehearsing a speech.
Yes.
And then Nick walks over.
So hilarious.
It's so good. He's so good.
It got me hook, line, and sinker.
So good.
It's
It's such a good scene. And so then Nick walks over with Vega and he starts examining, and then the guy starts saying the exact speech that he was rehearsing.
And he
And
like stutters. Like he does a great job, like
yeah,
being bad at delivering his speech and then kind of getting back into it.
yeah. And we learn from him though, or he claims at least, that he didn't even see Garrett tonight. Like he's just been working, head down, didn't even see him tonight, had nothing to do with it. Nick and Vega are then interviewing the other male employee, and he essentially says something very similar. Like, hey, I've been coding all night. I don't know what happened. But we do learn in this exchange that this employee was employee number 7 and the victim was employee number 6. And this guy has a bit of a hang up about
Yeah.
like the perks that the victim got because he was employee number 6 versus the employees he's
Well,
like the perks he's getting because he's employee number 7.
employee number 6 is the chief technology officer,
Mhm.
which at a technology firm is arguably probably one of the top 3
Oh yeah.
people in the company.
Yeah. When I worked for a software company, our CTO was our number 2 basically.
Yeah. Which means that like he's more than just like one employee in front of you, right?
Yeah.
But also if you're such a good employee, why are you working in the middle of the night?
Yeah.
I mean, although maybe there's sort of like a stigma that programmers are often late night people and could even prefer it, but it's sort of like, yeah, it's like, because they call it the night shift. They came in at like 6:00 at night to start their shift. I was like, you're not really that high up on the thing if you're starting your shift at 6:00 at night. So, but yeah, this guy is very, braggadocious, full of himself.
Yeah. He's definitely has a certain attitude, a certain air about him.
But
Nick,
I thought it was funny. He was like, "Oh, yeah, he was 6 and I was 7." And I was like, he's my boss, I guess, by chance. I'm like, I don't think that's the only reason.
probably not the only reason, as we'll find out a little bit later. Nick and Vega move on, and their interviews, they talk to the female employee. She is talking about, she sort of gets special treatment because she saved the company like $8.5 million a year previously. And she does admit that she saw the victim go into the server room, but
Yep.
she did not notice that he was gone, that like he didn't come back out. But she is quick to point out that nobody else noticed either. She was like, yeah, look, I didn't notice that he came back out, but also nobody else noticed he didn't come back out. So
that would be me at any job I've ever
that's what I was
had.
like. If someone was like, oh, did you notice that person walking by? I would have been like, what?
I was like, oh, yeah, I did. I did see them go in the bathroom. Did you see them come out? I was like, no, but they probably did.
Yeah, they probably did.
But I just didn't notice.
Yeah, like
that's I was working.
Yeah, that's they seem like Nick and Vega seem very dubious about this, but to me, I'm like, yeah, this could totally happen.
Yeah, there's a great line end of this or later about like, you were working. Yeah, that's what we do here.
Yeah, that's what we do here.
It's like we don't spend our whole time watching where people are going.
Yeah. Like we're here, putting our face down and getting the job done. So
coding is a very mentally engaging activity.
Yeah, so and I think I already mentioned this, like when we first pivoted to storyline B, there's a stark contrast in the atmosphere between storyline A and storyline B. And so I will say that I think the episode does a decent job of it, but I wanted to point it out kind of early. I think one of the difficulties of this episode is pivoting back and forth between the storylines because of how different the tone is between the two storylines.
At no point do people really take storyline B seriously. You don't and they don't like try to give it any gravitas because you don't learn anything about the victim.
Nope.
You barely ever even see an image of their face.
True.
Like they're just like this is like a roadblock in a video game. Mm-hmm. We have to figure out who murdered this person so we can move on with the rest of our lives.
Yep. So we go back to storyline A. Grissom is with Doc Robbins. We learn that Amy passed away because the bullet severed her spinal column. We then follow Grissom into the hallway. We hear a gunshot. He enters ballistics where Bobby and Warwick are, and we learn that the bullet that they recovered from they realized that the casings from the scene matched the automatic weapon. Like they shot the automatic weapon and they matched up the bullets. And so that was the automatic weapon that fired into Mr. Phelps. Great. We haven't had a good matchy in a while. This was a very, very nice matchy. We then have Jim Brass with Glenn Jacobs, and he's saying that he found the gun. That he did not do any shooting. He found the gun. Warwick, not buying it. Warwick thinks he is lying. Does not believe anything that this man is saying. We then have Warwick leaving an apartment, which we soon learn is the suspects. Grissom is also there, and this is where we learn Glenn might be a thief.
Yeah.
We're not quite sure on the murderer part yet, but like, probably almost definitely a thief. And
there's a weird part to this character where it's like the fact that he's a burglar and maybe not a murderer is almost like they don't get into it, but they're almost like setting up for this notion of like he's more of a bully than a thug, for lack of a better term, right? Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like he's an opportunistic person, he's not like he's not a murderer
he is looking for financial gain. As far as we know, his operative is not to physically hurt people.
Maybe we can talk about it more, I think, after we get through the episode. It's hard to get without getting through everything.
Let's keep going. So then they're investigating his car, and the only cans that are in there are like beer cans. Like the only bullets in there are beer cans.
I have a note that there's a great no gloves Grissom moment.
Oh, Grissom.
He's just like picking stuff up with his bare hands in the car.
Grissom, stop doing it. You know, put those gloves on, my friend. The vehicle, though, does have a dent, and it is silver. So, this is not looking great for the suspect at the moment. We then have Nick with David, and we learn that his victim had a single strike to the head, which is why there wasn't a lot of blood spatter, is because, and I only know this from watching way too much CSI and watching way too many true crime documentaries.
Earlier episodes already.
Yes. Because the thing is, like, the first time you hit somebody, the blood spatter comes from the blood is starting to pour out, and then you're hitting them again, and you're hitting somebody as blood is pouring out of them. But the first strike, there is no active blood flowing out of them, so you don't get the splatter effect. So that's why there's, like, not a lot of blood at the scene. But they did find black plastic in the wound. So that does come up a little bit later. I
guess I talk about the exact plastic. They don't spend a lot of time talking about what the plastic is, although they do reveal it.
They do reveal it. On. Yeah.
But I was like, there's a real big difference between, like, let's just say a plastic bag and a plastic toy. And I felt like I couldn't tell what they were talking about in the episode until they revealed what the source of the plastic was.
I think that's fair. I don't think that they did a good job of it. So we're then with Warwick. He's at the rec center, and I apologize. I think I'm just gonna keep calling him Mr. Phelps because Warwick calls him Matt, and then Grissom calls him Mr. Phelps. And so in my notes, I was like switching back and forth, but I think I'm just gonna go with Mr. Phelps. So Mr. Phelps, he's thinking that they got the shooter. He's like, okay, you got the guy.
I heard you got a guy, right?
Like, great. And Warwick is like, it's not quite that simple. And we also learned in this exchange that the rec center van was stolen a few days ago. And then Warwick, still trying to comfort him, asks, like, is there anything I can do for you? Mr. Phelps just wants 5 minutes with the shooter. That's all he wants. He'll feel a lot better if he just gets 5 minutes with the shooter.
All I can think of this scene is like, dude, you have a son.
Yes.
You cannot.
Yeah, there can't be vigilante justice going on here. Yeah. Grissom calls, and we learn that the suspect has an alibi. So then Warwick, with Mr. Phelps, is at the police headquarters.
Grissom, we've had this thing many times before. Do not bring the victim family into.
It's never worked out well. Yeah. It has never worked out well in any instance that we've seen this. And to give credit where credit's due, Grissom's like, why is he here? This isn't a good idea. He shouldn't be here. And we learn in the scene, though, that
why is he there? They don't need anything from him.
Warwick's explanation is that if they're going to release the suspect, somebody other than Warwick needs to explain to him why they're releasing the suspect.
Oh, yeah.
That's why he's there.
He does say that, yeah, which is BS, but
it is not a great reason. We learn that the alibi is in the form of a guy named David Artis, but Warwick is very quick to point out that he is a junkie and he's not going to be reliable. But Jim Brass walks up and says like, yeah, he's not the most reliable, but they were at the sports chalet and like workers can put them there. And so,
And together.
yeah, and together, like both of them were there.
Mhm.
And so at the moment, DA not going to file. So they let the suspect out. Mr. Phelps freaks out, like is trying to get to him, screaming that he killed his daughter, and for reasons that I maybe this plays into the he's more of a bully than anything else, but he's making this like
Yeah.
weird face as
Yeah.
Mr. Phelps as he's
This
walking
is-
out, like kind of giving him attitude, like, yeah, what are you gonna do? Like,
yeah,
just,
he's what's the word?
like taunting almost.
Taunting him, which doesn't make any sense. Like as if he's like just got off for a crime that he did do.
Yeah, it's
In,
strange.
what's the word? Is he like instigating? Right. That's the
Yeah.
sort of situation. Is like he's enjoying this notion of like this man's riled up, and I'm gonna instigate in the situation.
Yeah.
And make it worse, even though like the last thing I want are these people continuing to try to put me away for murder, because spoiler alert, this guy doesn't do it.
Spoiler alert, he's not the murderer.
Yeah. And so that plays into the idea is like he's basically being a tool just to try to like feel or look like a badass.
Yeah.
But realistically, he's just a low life who breaks into people's homes.
He's a bit of a bully.
You know?
Like he's just not a nice person. But we do learn that he's going to be put into protective custody because they're like, the community is going to want vengeance on this guy for killing, a 9-year-old girl. So we learn that he goes into protective custody. We then have Archie and Nick. We learn that Archie was out in the field. He was like, very excited about going out in the field with Nick. And they're bringing in everything that they collected, and they're making note that like lives are on the hard drives. And then Nick is looking through like a camera card, like he's looking through a camera, and he finds like somewhat, tamely risque pictures of Serena. So then
made for TV.
Yeah, 100% made for TV. This is not OnlyFans content here.
Well, I don't know if you know. There's a lot of OnlyFans that are about that risque.
That is true. This is the very gentle side of OnlyFans. So Nick and Vega are with Serena, and we learn that she was being sued for sexual harassment by the victim. But she's just saying like, hey, I was flirting with him, and then he thought that I was going to sue him, so then he sued me first. Like, and I have to give her credit. She was like, here's my lawyer's email. Yeah. Reach out to him. Like, I'm done talking. Like, I am all good.
I like this character a lot because she's like one of the most realistic characters.
Yes.
In these shows. She's like, "What, dude? It's harmless fun. Get over yourself, right?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he's like, "Yeah, this is what happened." And then she's like, at the end, she's like, "Okay, whatever. Here, I'll give him my lawyer's number.
Right. You can talk to him.
Talk to my lawyer, because if you're gonna arrest me, then you can talk to my lawyer."
Yeah. Yeah.
But was it? You said it was a camera. I was trying to figure out. It looked like a Palm Pilot.
Maybe it was a Palm Pilot. Maybe it was. It was a very weird screen. Maybe a BlackBerry.
Didn't have a keypad, but it was like a handheld. This is not quite. We're still like 4 or 5 years out from an iPhone.
Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure what it was supposed to be, but it was also super grainy.
It was very grainy. It was not high quality. So.
And then what had a weird title too. It was like.
Yeah, I can't remember what
something
the title
for love or something.
Yeah, it was something. It was something strange. Like, it was quirky and it was fun, but it was weird. We're then with Warwick. He's investigating the suspect's car, and he finds Mr. Phelps items. Like, he finds the trophies and such that had been
behind the seat somewhere for some reason.
Yeah, like wrapped in cloth. And so Warwick is amped up by this. He walks into a room where Grissom is, and he's like, "Hey, like, Jacobs was obviously in Mr. Phelps' house. Like, he has, all of these trophies and such." And Grissom has tried. This was actually a good Grissom boss moment, because he doesn't match Warwick's energy. He's trying to bring the energy down, which is like what you should do in this situation. Like, Warwick's coming in hot and heavy, and Grissom is like, "Hey, let's like bring it down a few steps." So he's like, "All right, that's all well and good, but like it needs to be tagged and cataloged, right? Like we gotta like follow our steps, and we gotta do our job." And Warwick starts going on a bit of a tangent about how, like, this is how he always works, and now when it matters, Grissom is trying to get in his way. And then he very poignantly says to Grissom, I'm not like you, or I can't be like you. I'm not a robot.
Yeah.
And this is the turning moment for Grissom, where he pulls him from the case. He's like, look, I'm sorry you're off the case, but like you're off the case. I'll get you another assignment tomorrow. And then Warwick not only storms out, but like almost pushes over a cart, like,
and he takes the stuff with him, which is
theft.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems with that. Although I think that was maybe just scene structure problems where the actor was holding this thing of items, because they don't even show him giving them back or anything.
No, there's no. We get no explanation scene on this one.
I will say, I feel like normally this is the kind of scene where Catherine would be like, yeah, calm down, Warwick. Like, you got to remember or do that. And I think Catherine is also maybe the other person in this show who has already had a thing or Grissom where they've referred to him as a robot before.
I believe so. I believe it was Catherine.
Yes. It's like almost like a rehashed piece of dialogue. But I will say, I verbally said out loud after the scene, I was like, "This is a really good episode." I was like, "This is really right." I was like, I'm invested. Like I was there. So
yeah,
we'll see if that maintains through the rest of the episode.
All right. We'll continue and we'll find out. We're with Nick in the hallway. Greg Sanders wants to talk to him, and we learn that Greg Sanders.
I was gonna say, one thing is great use of showing all the other people who work in the lab in that scene. Great like shots, and it also like giving that work environment. Like you've had maybe
oh no, I have
working in an office long enough. Something will happen.
Yep.
There'll be a thing. Yep. Everyone's kind of like looking at each other.
Yeah, like, what do we do now? Like, this is getting awkward and uncomfortable.
Or even like amongst a friends group when like two of your friends are fighting or something.
Yeah.
Or a family thing. Everyone runs into these moments, and they did a great job of it. But also then getting to show all these guys unseen and sort of visually see the lab. Like it was, I think for me to sort of like put that mental picture that like, no, they're all right.
Yeah, they're all right there. They're all working within like 5 feet of each other.
Yeah. So that was another fun part of that scene that really wasn't in the core of the scene, but elevated the scene, I think.
I agree. I think that's a very good way to describe it. So then we're with Nick in the hallway. Greg Sanders wants to talk. We learned that he wants to talk because Nick took Archie in the field. And Greg Sanders is like, I want to go out in the field. Like, how could you have taken Archie? And then this was a needed moment of brevity. Nick's like, hey, you know how it goes. Like, you picked the right tool for the job.
Yeah, but that's not what I wanted to talk about.
What then?
Look, I thought that we had a relationship. What are you doing taking Archie out into the field instead of me?
That's the right tool for the right job, man. You have to understand the world you're investigating.
And so he turns to Archie and he's like, hey, like what Star Trek episode is it with the guy with like the thing on his forehead? And I am a Trekkie. And so Archie, without missing a beat, is like, oh, original series, like DS9, Next Generation, Enterprise. And then he's like, do you mean Farscape, actually? We could be talking about like, it was perfect. And Greg Sanders was like, fine, all right, good point. Like,
I feel like Nick's delivery, his character, it was a little bit of like, I don't know, like almost like down-putting dismissiveness for Archie. Like he's making the point, but like it was a little less lighthearted and a little bit too like, oh, that's nerd stuff. Because then he walks over, he's like, well, I don't actually care.
But okay, yeah, I didn't like that part of it, but I will say,
but I agree, I love the scene, I love Archie in that scene. I love Greg being like, okay, fine.
Yeah, and so, but also then, like, so this scene continues between Archie and Nick, and this is where we had referenced this earlier in the episode, but Archie had found an RPG type game on Anders' computer, and in this game, Anders is like summoned as a devil and then kills Garrett Kwan's character in the game. So they're like, well, but then, Nick, I feel like they like each other and they have enough of a rapport because Nick's like, man, you know a lot about this. And Archie's like, yeah, I do. Like, I'm into it. And Nick's like, oh, you need to get a girlfriend. And then Archie, without missing a beat, is like, well, you first. Like, you're going to come. And but none of it was like spoken with malice. It was all spoken in like we're comrades and we can joke about these things with each other because like we're on that level with one another.
Yeah, it's very collegiate.
Yeah. So then Nick and Vega are with Anders, and he's just saying, hey, look, it was just a game. Just wanted to like blow off some steam. It doesn't mean anything. But he was developing a sim game on company time, and the victim did report him to the board. So like there is some motive there. We then have, and this is the second episode in a row, so we have Grissom checking out a dumpster, and there is very funky music playing.
Yeah.
While he's checking out this dumpster. And I was like, what is happening? So he's kind of checking out this dumpster. He walks away a bit from the dumpster. Two officers pull up. They let him know that they're...
I was going to say, it was very weird, the interaction with the officers, because they're not like, why are you here? Like, who is this man crawling around the dumpster? Oh, they probably know who he is, because he's a supervisor, but then they're just like, carry on, you're crawling, we're doing something else directly next to each other. They don't have like that moment of like corroboration that I think would happen in real life.
Yeah,
but it makes for the rest of the scene.
It does. So
a little bit of comedy in this.
A little bit, yeah. So they pull up. They do let Grissom know that they're checking on a possible burglary that got called in last night, but they're now just getting around to checking on it, and they're trying to figure out how to get into the house. And Grissom just goes around and opens the gate. Like he's just like, the door's open. I'm just gonna hit the button and open the gate. But as he's standing, the officers are like going through the house. He's standing in front of it. He notices like one of the spires on the gate is bent. So he's starting to think like, wait a second here. Maybe this like story about finding this gun in or near a dumpster is not actually true.
I thought someone jumped the fence until they showed the reenactment. I did not get the memo.
Yes. We see a reenactment of the gun being thrown from a car, and the gun itself is what bends the spire. And Grissom also finds a bullet in the front yard. So then Grissom is with our lovely Prince lady, and he's hoping that there's a recoverable print on this bullet that he found. So she's going to run it. We then have Nick with an evidence box, and we learn that Quan spied on all his employees. Like he had software on all of their computers tracking all their moves.
They somehow found this undiscoverable software.
Yes.
Very quickly. Without needing expertise.
Yep. And then they found the disc that was burned from like from the murder day. But
presumably it was the last one, because
that's what I would think.
It wasn't there.
I feel like he pulled it out of the middle. I feel like he pulled the disc out of the middle, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. But I was like, I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But we learned from this magical disc that everybody was working when he was killed. So,
or they had one of those water birds just on their keyboard every 30 seconds.
We then have a scene with Warwick. He's calling, and he's trying to get the relocated address for Jacobs, and he gets it.
This is for sure a felony or something.
This is
that does not ever seem to pay for. But
nope, this is dicey at the very least, and then possibly a felony at the very worst. So then Warwick is at an apartment complex. He confronts Jacobs. This is, if we didn't already know it, this is where we get confirmation that Jacobs is just like a nasty human being who likes bullying people, because he like brings up that Warwick was teased about being a nerd in school. Like, who cares? You guys are like in your 30s, like your late 20s, early 30s at this point. Like, who cares that he was teased in like middle school? Like, what does that matter in where you are in life right now? So
well, it matters to a guy like that who
it does, evidently. So Warwick is like, all right, man, like, if you're not afraid of me, like, let's go. And we get the scene of Jacobs shutting the door in his face. But we have what I think is a very good, then like immediate cut to Jacobs badly beaten up in a hospital bed.
Yeah, I feel like it's not obvious if he's shutting the door in his face or he's coming outside. Like they do a good job with the edit and the cut.
Yeah.
Because now obviously he's been beat up by somebody.
He's been beat up by somebody.
Could it have been Warwick?
Right. So then Jim Brass is calling, trying to figure out like, how did this happen? Right. Because he's like, I knew the address, and then he's on the line with the person who gave Warwick the address and was like, what is going on? Like, we're the only two people that knew. So then Grissom is showing pictures of Jacobs very badly beaten to Warwick. And this, not a good Grissom boss move. This is Warwick's new assignment. But he also doesn't discount the possibility that Warwick could be the perpetrator.
Yeah, well, I think he does think that Warwick isn't the person
No,
because
I don't
of
think
the
he.
bruise or the mark that he's showing him. But I do think that also because it's Warwick or it's the person he knows. But yeah, either way,
But his
definitely
behavior
that
as of late
person.
should not be rewarded by getting. And I know that, but it's also like,
You're
is
also
Grissom
putting him
doing
back
this as
on
a
the case.
punishment?
Yeah. Well,
And that's also a vindictive thing to do. I
I think
don't think there's any
Grissom.
way to
Yeah,
cut it where this is a good move by Grissom.
I think you're supposed to think that they kind of know who the person likely is, and so Warwick. Now your punishment is you have to go arrest this person.
Yeah, which like that's not
Which you should not be doing.
that's not how you punish
What's Sarah doing? She's free, as far as we know.
Catherine, Sara. Like what are the ladies up to in this episode? We don't know. They're never even like mentioned. They don't even get a like. They're at a conference. Yeah, we got nothing. So then we're with.
They're seeing they're filming the C storyline, which
exactly, which just didn't make it in because there's too much B storyline. We're back with Nick and Vega. They're in the server room and they're just like, well, someone had to kill him. Like
I like how they've like given up. There's no possible way any of those other three people.
Yeah, gave it up. It's none of the employees. And so Nick is realizing like, okay, this is the only way in. This is the only way out. Except like cold air gets in and out, and so he looks up the shaft and he sort of almost tries to go up it and then realizes like there's no way that I can get up it. But there's this like black plastic wrap all on the inside of the shaft, and there's like one tiny section of it missing, and he's like, I think this is a key.
I actually thought at first the plastic was like part of the vent because there's like a really big hole in the middle of the vent as well.
Yes, there is.
Which I feel like they actually had to cut in order to make the scene work.
Probably.
For the idea that something went through it.
Yeah. Probably. Most likely. We then are back with Warwick. He's with Mr. Phelps. He needs to see his hands. And then we very quickly learn that he is the one that assaulted Jacobs and that he followed Warwick. That's how he knew where he was. And his perspective has changed. He now believes an eye for an eye. He used to tell Warwick, like, that's going to make the whole world go blind. But now he's saying, nope, I needed this. And so they arrest him. They lead him out. Obviously, people are surprised and upset, mainly his son, of course. And after he is taken away, an officer approaches Warwick and lets him know that they found the van that was stolen from the rec center.
Down by the river.
So Warwick approaches the van, and there's casings all over the floor of this van. I
really enjoy the scene of Grissom discovering paint on the front of this car.
Yeah, Grissom approaches
staring at 29mm bullet casings.
Yep.
We're like, I think this is our van.
Yep. Yeah, so just in case we needed more proof, as Nick mentioned, Grissom walks up. He notices a dent and blue paint transfer. And this is where Grissom lets Warwick know that he thinks that Jacob lied about where he found the gun. Because he found the gun because he was robbing a house.
Yep.
But he doesn't think that Jacob lied about anything else. Like, as far as the shooting went. So he's like, I do think that he lied about where he found the gun, but he was telling the truth about everything else. Grissom finds a, like, chewed up lollipop stick. So before we wrap up that thread, we're back with Nick and Vega. They're talking to the handyman of the building, a guy named Carlin. And we learned that he killed Quan accidentally when his hammer fell from his little waist thing, and
he's not very good about lawyering up his.
He's not. He should have followed Serena's lead. He did not.
But also, he did not commit murder.
He did not.
I mean, he's going to jail.
He's going to jail because it could be like manslaughter or
involuntary manslaughter. Maybe, but like I think realistically, the thing he's going to get to is tampering with evidence, lying to the police. Well, maybe I guess he never lied to the police.
Yeah, he was never interviewed. As far as we know, he was not interviewed.
All sort of ancillary things, and he's probably gonna. I don't know. Because someone died, it's unlikely that he's going to get parole and no jail time. They're going to probably try to stick him, but he technically didn't murder this guy.
He did not murder him.
And he should have just
admitted to what happened. Yeah. No, but instead
he would have lost his job. It would have been.
Oh yeah. It wouldn't have been good for him, but it would probably be better than this outcome. And we learned that the way that he was able to get his hammer back.
He didn't even wash the blood off. You can't even get him for tampering for evidence. He didn't even wash the blood off.
He didn't. No, he used a makeshift grabby tool to get his hammer back. And then we do have a little bit like this has mostly been a very campy storyline and just kind of like offbeat. And again, I think very purposefully a light juxtaposition to
Yeah.
the much darker storyline A. But there's a bit of a sad moment where he's like, look, people never notice me. And I was just kind of hoping that this would be the same. Like in this situation, it would actually work out in my favor. That like no one ever noticed that I'm
Yeah.
there. But he got
So,
noticed. So
so they do a perp walk, which
they
it's
do.
really been a while, I feel like, since they've
Yeah,
done
it's been a
perp
while
walk.
since there's been a
But
perp
also,
walk.
my understanding is that Rome is not inside attached to the hyper, so they had to like walk him in to walk him out.
Yes, I
He
would think
wasn't
so.
like they don't have like a janitorial closet that
I
he's
don't think
in.
so.
He was in like
The
a
buildings.
building, like in another part of the building,
Yeah.
and so there is no. There's only one way in and out.
They
and it's
wanted
the
to
key
they
card
wanted
door.
to do more theater. Remember? We had theater
Yeah.
in our restaurant episode and they just wanted
That's
to do
true,
more
that's true.
theater. So
But it made,
that's all it is.
but everyone noticed him. But yeah, it was a great perp walk. It reminds me early on in the episode they used to do these perp walks at the end of the show, and then everybody would be standing outside in a line.
Yes. Yeah. Like
It was like
the first in the first
3
season.
or 4 episodes.
Yeah,
They did
it
this like
was.
every episode, and then
They
it
did.
never happened again.
Yeah. They're bringing back a little bit of the theater here. So that wraps up storyline B. We go back to Greg Sanders flirting with another tech, and Warwick and Grissom interrupt him and are like, hey, you need to get DNA from this lollipop stick. We then learn that our woman in ballistics came through. She isolated a thumbprint from the bullet that Grissom provided to her, and it comes back to a Tyrell Constantine who is only 15 years old. Then we have, and I'm going to do my best to make this make sense, but we have a series of scenes cutting between Jim Brass and Grissom with Tyrell and Warwick with Phelps. So we kind of like keep jumping back and forth between these scenes. So
it was well cut too.
It was very well cut. It's just in trying to take notes, it might sound a little choppy, but the episode does a really good job of it. So Jim Brass is with Grissom and they're with Tyrell and they're talking about shooting someone. He's like, who said I shot anyone? And Grissom's like, me. I said that you shot someone.
You should have said the evidence does.
Yeah. And then Warwick is with Phelps, and Mr. Phelps knows Tyrell. He threw him out of the rec center like a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then we're back with Jim Brass and Grissom and Tyrell's saying like, yeah, man, I didn't mean to kill anyone. I just wanted to scare Mr. Phelps.
Yeah.
Like he booted me out of the rec center.
The level of
he like showed me up in front of my friends. And so, yeah, that lawyer needed to shut him up and she did not.
No, the level of disbelief on Grissom's face when he's like, oh, wait, you weren't trying to shoot the kid with the girlfriend?
Yes.
He was like more broken up by that than he was that a little girl died.
Yeah. Well, because I think we're supposed to understand that these cut scenes are almost happening at the same time. So as like Warwick is learning that Mr. Phelps knew Tyrell.
Yeah.
Grissom didn't know that.
Correct.
Right. So like that's, so Grissom is like, wait, what? Like your target was actually Mr. Phelps.
Yeah.
And
he's more broken up that he was wrong about his guess.
Yeah, about his initial theory.
What happened.
Yeah. I mean, it's not fun being proven wrong, but it's okay to be proven wrong, listeners. Sometimes we're wrong.
Yeah.
So that's okay.
Often.
Oftentimes. Quite a bit. We're wrong. So then they're sort of all walking out. They're all being walked out. And Mr. Phelps says that he's kind of taking some of the blame onto himself. He's saying, like, I gave up on him. If I didn't give up on him.
He's taking it real well since he just almost murdered another
He
guy.
almost killed somebody else.
He did break into his house. But
he did break into his house.
He didn't do anything.
Other than that, he didn't do anything wrong. And
Which, 1 in a million odds that the guy who broke into your house would be robbing the house where the guy who just shot your daughter is trying to dispose of the gun.
This is true. This was a bit of a
one of two 1 in a millions this episode.
Yeah, it was a bit. Yeah, that's true. So, they all walk away. We're left with Grissom and Warwick, and Warwick is just like, I blew it, and Grissom's like, yep. He goes, but you're not the one paying for it.
No.
And to reiterate,
episode where Warwick quits to run a rec center for the rest of his life.
So to reiterate this point, just in case you didn't fully grasp what Grissom meant by that, our final scenes are Warwick visiting the rec center as it's being locked down because now there's nobody to run the rec center anymore.
Nope.
So
Mr. Phelps is going to spend the next 5 years in prison, probably.
Yeah. So
They're probably not going to be allowed to be around children for a while.
Probably not. Probably not. So that is the end of the episode. So Nick, what did you think about today's episode?
So I liked the episode. I think, as I exasperated earlier, like 3/4 of the episode, I was like, "This is a really good episode."
Yeah.
On final reflection, again, we got a real like Scooby-Doo ending here with Mr. Phelps' case. Although I don't think at any point they were like really selling us. I think we were always meant to believe that this
Jacobs didn't do it.
Jacobs wasn't really the real killer, and they were just trying to figure out how do they get to that point.
Yeah.
So that was fine. But I started to realize there was no Sarah, right? There was no Catherine. Like, so felt really riveting and good because they did a lot of character development. That's obviously one of the things that make episodes really good. But like, that was the plot line, right? That was they could have done that and then still had those other things. They could have still had everyone involved. The B storyline, I actually like the B storyline because it's kind of silly and it's a real like puzzle. And as you mentioned, it really, I think, is serving a purpose to be in contrast to what is otherwise a really intense storyline.
Yeah.
The pacing on the episode, I think, is really, really good. And I hemmed and hawed, and I was going to give it a 4.
Okay.
And I ended up on a 3.5 with a rewatch.
Okay.
Because I just felt like all the things that were great about this episode, you could have those. And then I could give you 3 other things to layer on those. And each one of those is probably worth half a star.
Yeah.
The first and obvious being, where's the rest of the cast?
Where's the rest of the cast? Very fair.
And maybe could have done a little bit better job, I think, with some of the evidence stuff in the B storyline. The evidence was actually a lot of good sort of evidence stuff in the first storyline.
Yeah.
But again, they kind of rushed that last little bit. Like, Greg Sanders, please go run the DEA on this. It's not going to do anything other than confirm her suspicious and become a throwaway line.
Yeah, in the interrogation room. Yeah.
But like, so like that evidence, but the bullet and finding the bullet, and it was all like that Grissom picking up where and doing the thing that work should have been doing, and why the fact that was critical to solving the story. Like, I loved all of that. And it was pretty easy to watch a second time. I owe that a lot, I think, to pacing.
Yeah.
Like, I think they did a really good job, good editing. So if there was it was just not quite at 4, I think, because there were just, I think, some things there. But this is, and I kept thinking about I gave 4 to, and I was like, which one would I rather watch again? And I don't know that I know the answer, but
oh, okay, all right,
yeah, I was just like, I don't know. I was like, I just felt like this one, like, I wanted the things that I liked, things that made the last episode really good. Were all the things that this episode was missing, and the things that made this episode were already good were the things that made the last episode missing.
Yeah.
So I was like, it definitely, and it was rewatchable. So I was like, it definitely be rewatchable, but I just ended up at 3.5. But it's really like a 3.99. I just didn't quite give it the 4 status, but it was very, very close. It's probably about as close as you can be to 4 without getting it. And I think that if there was a cameo scene from Catherine and Sara, I probably would have given it a 4. But that really bothered me. I didn't even realize it in the first watch through, and that made a testament to how good it was. But it kind of bothered me. I was like, no. The best episodes of CSI are going to do everything really well.
Right.
So I guess set the bar a little higher.
That's
so
fair.
It's like,
that's fair. So
it's like you can't not have half the cast and still get credit.
Yeah. So I'm willing to give this episode a 4,
Good.
But acknowledging that Catherine and Sara are not in this episode. And that is annoying. But most of the things that I harped in the last episode about them not having really shined through on this one. So I was like, well, this has most of the things that I say I really love in an episode. So I was like, I feel, and this, at least this for me, was a much easier rewatch the second go through. Like, the second rewatch of this one was much easier than the last episode for me personally. So
you took the Evan Rachel Wood storyline from last time and the work storyline from this episode, and you put them together.
That probably would have been like
one
too
of
heavy.
The best episodes.
Yeah, but I think
it would be an hour and a half long.
It would be an hour and a half long and probably too heavy. I appreciate that the episode gave you breaks from the intensity of storyline A with storyline B, and very purposely let you know that storyline B was not to be taken seriously. Like
I'm-
they basically were like, hey, here's your little like downtime to
Yeah.
relax before we go back to like a very intense storyline A. And I appreciate that was offered in this episode.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure there are TV production reasons for why Catherine and Sarah were in this episode.
yeah, I'm sure
But
there
you
are.
could very easily imagine, one of them being the Detective Vega role in this episode, and that would have made the episode better. And then they don't have the time to fit in a C plot like a graveyard. What was the one C plot with Sarah and the guy who was digging up bodies?
Yes, because he was reburying. Yeah, because he was reusing the caskets.
Where it was only actually like 3.5 minutes of the whole episode. They could, I guess, had one of those, but yeah, maybe there's a different version of the script out there that would have made it happen. And two really fun spot the guest stars without being like really big actors, but having kind of cool and a connection between them.
Yeah, so obviously I miss Catherine and Sara, but this had obviously great backstory, great character building. I will say and this is more a telling of the times, not a reflection on the actors, because I think both Warwick and Mr. Phelps did amazing in this episode. But it's just more of being a little bit more cognizant now of the like angry black man as a trope.
Yep.
And so that was like a little off-putting throughout this episode, that they were so heavily relying on that trope. But then I'm trying to give them a little bit of grace in that says like 23 years old. A little bit of
like Warwick is our, token black character with a rough background.
Yes.
And so the storyline, like, it's almost like cringy.
It's a little.
It has to be connected to his background, and
like
drive-by shooting is a little on the nose.
Yeah, it's just again, I'm trying to give it a little bit of grace because of how long ago it came out, but that part of it did not age well. But Warwick did a great, the actor who plays Warwick did a fantastic job. Like he did so great in this episode, and I'm all for character development and learning backstories. So Gary Dordan, you did a great job, and Keith David did a great job as Matt Phelps. And yeah, so I say 4 out of 5. I would say probably rewatch. I feel like this is a solid. Yeah. This one can be. I don't think it has to be rewatched. Like I wouldn't be like, oh, you have to watch this twice. But I think it can be enjoyed on a rewatch. I think you can enjoy it watching it a second time.
Doesn't really have Easter eggs that, like,
no.
At some of the episodes, but now I'm low key a little sad that I only gave it 3.5 stars. But unfortunately, I rank my things in pen, and so they cannot be unwritten.
It's fair. It's okay. It's all right. I gave it the 4. So,
but it wouldn't surprise me if we get to the end of the season and you ask me my favorite episode is, and I'd be like, I think it's actually this one.
Yeah, you're like, actually, maybe this.
Even though I didn't give it the highest ranking, like,
yeah, I think
it's like that they're not. You can have favorites that you don't think are the best.
Yes.
It's definitely a top episode so far this season, though.
I would agree. And we'll see how we feel about next week's episode when we return and review season 3, episode 14, One Hit Wonder. In the meantime, you can support us on Patreon by searching for Who Are You: a CSI podcast. You can find us on Facebook the same way. We're also on Twitter /X and Instagram at Who Are You CSI Pod. Or check out our website, whoareyoucsipod.com. But otherwise, we'll talk to you next week.
No spoilers.
No spoilers.